If you're wondering, like, why would Christie tell anybody that he murdered his father? That actually is kind of a central story point of the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jackson, I'm here with Jacob, and we're back talking about another great play today. This play is sort of in the category of a little bit more historical. We usually do, like, maybe, one or two out of the season that are, from another century at least. Today, that is one of those plays today. We're talking about Playboy of the Western World by John Millington Synge.
Yes, this is an Irish classic. Somehow it ended up that we're doing these Irish plays back to back.
Yeah.
I don't think that was intentional, as far as I remember from when we were planning this season, but it so happens that way. Also, and I'll say this up front, and then I probably won't bring it up again, A+ title. This play has an awesome title. I can't get over it. I think Playboy of the Western World is a great title. It's memorable. It stands out. It's pretty descriptive of what it's about. Like you hear that and you're like, I kind of get the vibe of what I'm after here. And it's evocative. I don't know. I like it.
Got a good cadence to it, right? Like you can saying that you're going to see it. You can rattle it off.
Yeah,
in a
you
sentence.
can tell that it's a play from a different time because the play ends with somebody saying the title out loud, which is like, that's a classic, like, play from another century. They're going to say the title in the last line of the play. But so be it, That's fine. That's fine. This play, if you don't know John Millington Synge, I will do just a brief introduction to his legacy in the context section of the episode. But in terms of the playwrights to come out of Ireland, of which there are many fabulous ones, Synge is among the most famous. I mean, a world-renowned, internationally acclaimed, which, of course, that means the same thing. So regardless, this is a very well-known historical playwright. Really didn't write for very long in terms of history, and actually doesn't really have that many plays. But for what they are and what they did and do in theater history, they're very well known. They have a lot of historical value, and they're performed in large part for that reason. And if you're going to see this play, in part what you are seeing is Synge's portrayal of life at this time. In this very particular way that he does it. And again, I'll talk about that more in the context section. But it's important to know that, I think, going in, that part of what the play does is present a time in history, a story, and a very funny story. And this is a comedy, but it is a portrayal of life in a place at a time in a very particular way.
Yeah. This play definitely has that sort of like realism or slice of lifeness to it. However, unlike some of the other plays that might spring to mind, this play has that sort of like joy in it. There's a little bit of an essay from Synge at the front of my version of this play that I read, and it talks about like how joy is an essential part of theater, which doesn't always find its way into realism. Now that joy takes place in sort of like a raucous comedy in this particular play, but it's interesting to have both comedy slash joy in the conversation with a pretty, right next door to naturalistic realism.
Yeah, and in fact, you may be more familiar than you are with this script, oh dear listener. You may be more familiar with Synge's play Riders to the Sea, which is a one-act play that is in the same vein of sort of accurate, naturalistic presentation of a people in a place at a time, but is certainly not the comic force that this play is. I mean, this play is a big ensemble, riotous play about kind of a funny premise with these sort of big characters. So it's interesting that, I mean, this play and Riders to the Sea are his best known, In the Shadow of the Glen too, but Riders to the Sea and this play, other than that they share his fascination with a particular kind of Irish person at a particular time in history, they're very opposite plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very different vibes.
This is like a long, sprawling 3-act epic comedy, and Riders to the Sea is like a deeply tragic, very simple 1-act story. And yet they are both part of the legacy of this, famous historical playwright.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And like cool to see like that big of a swing, right? Between the two of them and pull out what is similar and what is different. Excited for the conversation on it today.
Before we dive in any further, we do want to let you know about something coming up on the podcast. If you are a regular listener, you may know, of course, that we do a themed month every season. Our regular programming would try to have very different conversations week to week. We intentionally try to program plays back to back that are different in some way, and so that we have very different kinds of conversations about very different voices in across our seasons. But for 4 episodes every season, about a month of episodes, we like to have conversations about plays that share something in common. In the past, we've done plays by a particular playwright, plays of a particular length, plays from a particular time in history, plays that have some sort of thematic commonality. Plays that have some sort of image that they all share. We've done plays that have magic in them. We've done all kinds of different things that we can group plays and look at them together as opposed to individually, which is generally what we do. This time around, we are excited to announce that our theme month for season 15 will be Adaptation Month. That's right, we are looking at 4 plays and musicals that are adaptations of other pieces of work. As you know, many other things are adaptations of theater. Many movies are adaptations of plays, etc. But there are, of course, plays that are adaptations of movies, of books, of video games, hint, hint. And so we will be looking at 4 plays which adapt other sources of storytelling, entertainment, media, and we will be announcing those titles week to week as we get there. But if you are a patron on our Patreon page, you've already heard this announcement, and you will get that heads up about the titles that we are going to be looking at. So watch your email inboxes for that. Speaking of, if you're not a patron, encourage you to head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, all one word, no hyphens, no underscores. That's where you can become a supporter of the show. Our supporters make doing this show possible. We love to do it. It's great to have these conversations, but it's not possible without the financial support of listeners like you. Sorry, PBS. And so, if that's not you, please take a look. There are, of course, different tiers. You know how Patreon works. Our lowest tier will continue to be $1 a month. For $1 a month, $12 over the whole course of the year, you can support the running of this show, and even at that level, you are really part of making No Script happen. Huge thank you to our supporters. This episode, as with all our episodes, are possible because of you. Thank you. If that's not you yet, check us out. Patreon.com/noscriptpodcast. And now, back to the script.
There we go.
Woo, this is the Jacob section of the podcast.
It's true. You got a big block
1, 2, 3,
this time.
right in a row. I got to take a pause and grab a sip of something or I'm going to die. So, J.M. Synge, as we have said, is a famous Irish playwright, part of what we call the Irish literary revival. I want to be careful here not to pretend that I'm an expert on Ireland, Ireland's literary history, or really anything about it. That is not my area at all, so I am speaking only from the most basic level of research about Synge and about the Irish literary revival. But this is a period in time, the late 19th, early 20th century, sort of precedes the Harlem Renaissance, if you know your sort of art history in that way, that had all kinds of poetry and songwriting and playwriting and novels that sort of sprung up from Irish writers at the time. The figure that you're most likely to know from the Irish literary revival would be W.B. Yeats, for poetry as well as playwriting themselves. Synge is, as were many, playwright and poet of the time. He's really known for his particular way of staging this realism, this realistic, naturalistic portrayal of Irish societies and cultures. And that comes from, and I'll place this in context of his chronology here in a second, but it comes from time he spent on the Aran Islands. And if you Google pictures of the Aran Islands, you will certainly recognize them because they're often kind of the portrayal of Ireland in media, and that I know that certain Irish people feel that is a stereotype of Ireland, and that is somewhat born of folks like, of stereotype. Really, that's all I have to say about it. Again, I'm no expert. But Synge spent some time on the Aran Islands, ended up writing a book about the people and language and stories of the Aran Islands. And so Riders to the Sea is sort of born out of that experience, out of the language, out of the things like that. And this play, too, is born out. So the story goes, this play is based on a sort of myth or story he heard during that period in his life where he was living there and documenting the people. He says this in the preface of my copy of the script. Anyone who has lived in real intimacy with the Irish peasantry will know that the wildest sayings and ideas in this play are tame indeed, compared with the fancies one may hear in any little hillside cabin and then some Irish places that I'm not going to try to pronounce. All art is a collaboration, and there is little doubt that in the ages, I'm sorry, I mistyped this. So in the something ages of literature, striking and beautiful phrases were as ready to the storyteller or the playwright's hand as the rich cloaks and dresses of his time. So really believed in capturing the way that people talk. And that makes, frankly, this play a little difficult to read, as is Riders to the Sea, because it is an attempt to capture on paper a particular dialect. And so very much in the same way, if you're used to reading Shakespeare, you sort of have to warm up into reading it. You have to sort of retrain your brain in the first handful of pages how to read what you're seeing on the page. That is a similar experience to reading Playboy of the Western World. Synge studied music initially at Trinity College Dublin in Germany. He ended up living in Paris for a while, but then goes back to Ireland, and that is where he spends his time in the Aran Islands before he moves to Dublin and co-founds one of the great national theaters of the world, the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. The story of the founding of the Abbey Theatre, what it is supposed to mean to Irish people and Irish culture, is a fabulous story that I am not the one that you should listen to tell. So I'm not going to tell that story here, other than to say the Abbey Theatre in Dublin is one of the world's more important theaters. And if you don't know much about it, I encourage you to check it out. I'm also going to throw a link into the script notes for this podcast, and you can check out more information there. He's died young, unfortunately. That is sort of the story. Playwrights of this era are just as often to die young as anybody, unfortunately, and that is maybe part of why his library is not as full as it could be. Died of Hodgkin's-related cancer at age 37, and had not really published that many plays. In fact, it was really only in the later part of his career that he was a true playwright in any sense of the word. And so a small library, but very, very influential library in history. Again, Playboy of the Western World, supposedly based on this myth that he heard. It was initially presented at the Abbey Theatre in 1907 was the premiere. And so the story goes, Jackson and I had some fun describing our own independent research on this beforehand, because of what's in the play that I'm sure Jackson will tell you about. It was so objectionable to the audience that there were riots in the streets during its opening run at the Abbey. And that's what I'll put a script note in. That's the link that I want to provide you all, is about the Abbey Theatre initially, and then it also describes what happened in Dublin during this initial show. So it's from The Guardian. I'll put that in there for you to check out if you want. But that sort of controversy that existed, I pronounced that word weird, that controversy that existed doesn't just stop there. It extends to the American tour of this show that was in the early 1910s, where supposedly people were so offended by the content of this play that they would throw vegetables and I have written down stink bombs at the performers during the show. And at one point, the crowd, I can't remember if this was in Ireland or in America, the crowd was so infuriated that they had to perform the whole last act of the play as like a mime. They couldn't do any of the lines. I mean, it's just crazy. Eventually, the performing company here in America was arrested in Philadelphia for putting on an immoral performance, quote unquote. This is, of course, then places this play in that lineage of plays in early America where people were being arrested for immoral performance. There's great other plays about that. Indecent by Paula Vogel tracks another play where the performers were arrested for indecent performance, quote unquote. This play because of what it is. It's a worldwide known classic. As usual, I just can't track all performances. I'll just note a couple, and then I'm going to really focus on more recent ones. The Edinburgh Gateway Company in March 1957, and then the Irish Rep in New York does it in both 1990 and 2002. Rochester Community Players in 98, 2004, the American Players Theater in Wisconsin, 2005, just to note, the Druid Theater Company, who we talked about last time as being very influential in the Walworth farce, performs it. 2007, there is a revival at the Abbey in Dublin, and this begins, as far as I can tell, the part of the history of this play, which is taking the essential story and adapting it to a new culture. So in the way that part of what Synge is doing is tracking a particular cultural people in a particular time and place, this play has then been adapted to other very specific kinds of cultures. So the revival at the Abbey in 2007 is a modern adaptation that's set not on the, in Mayo County, but in West Dublin, and it's about a Nigerian refugee. That production has been performed a couple more times, but there's also more adaptations that I'll talk about. 2011, the Old Vic in London. 2014, at the New England Youth Theater, which I did just a little looking into because I was so curious about it. This is a group of teenagers that performed this play, which is awesome. I mean, what a challenge. That's great. 2019, the Quintessence Theater in Philly. 2020, the Rochester Community Players. Again, if you'll remember that they had done it 20-some years earlier. That production was canceled due to COVID. Very sad. 2022, City Lit Theater in Chicago. 2024, Winchester Little Theater. 2024, a company that I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, but I'm pronouncing Ines Nua Theater Company in Philly, did that same adaptation of the Nigerian sort of cultural production. 2025, just earlier this year, the Rogue Theater in Arizona and the Live and Dread Company in Virginia. And part of the reason why we're doing this script in this season is, of course, opening in December of this year, 2025, and running through January of 2026 at the National Theatre in London is what looks to be a very fun production of this script. You'll see all kinds of materials online right now because, of course, they're advertising it bonkers. So check that out if you're in London or in the surrounding areas. You can see it live. It may or may not end up on their streaming library. I hope so, because I'd love to watch that. This play, given its historical stance, has been translated into languages all over the world. It's been adapted, as we talked about, in that a story about West Dublin and a Nigerian refugee. There's also a 1984 adaptation into Trinidad culture by a Trinidadian playwright called Playboy of the West Indies. There's a 2006 adaptation based around Mandarin Chinese as a language and culture. It's also been adapted into a film in 1962. London TV made a sort of educational version of the show with some more cultural details and sort of more dramaturgy around it, 1964. And in 1994, there is a TV movie adaptation called Paris or Somewhere, which is set in Saskatchewan. So it's also sort of part of that history of keeping the essential story, but changing the sort of cultural lens of the play that Synge was so interested in. So, very storied script, historical script. You could do 3 hours of a podcast just on productions of this play in the same way you can other historical scripts of the era.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of different versions to catch. There's lots of recordings of it, so definitely one that is popularly seen and known and often produced. I'm excited for the conversation today. Just going to jump into a brief synopsis, as brief as I can be, of this play to get us started. This play takes place in County Mayo, which is on the kind of west-northwest-ish part of Ireland, and it takes place in a pub. It's pretty much, as you've kind of already heard within the context, time in this play was likely the present when it was written, so 1900s, early 1900s, and so that's kind of the time that we're working with as far as the base level of the script. That's what we'll be discussing today. But as you just heard, there's plenty of adaptions that do play with the time a lot. So there's lots of different ones out there. But this particular version is in a pub. This pub is owned by Michael James Flaherty, but he doesn't really run it all that much. Rather, his daughter, Margaret, is the one who kind of runs it, who I will refer to now as every other character does throughout the play as Pegeen. And so she kind of is the runner of the pub, while Michael tends to just sort of go to wakes, at least within the context of this script. It's a couple days and just only like 2 days of time, but he's at a wake most of the time. And they're different wakes. Some
sort of like games, like fun and games festival the next day.
Yeah.
So yeah, not around very much, it does seem.
Right. But the kind of structure of this play is a stranger comes to town. And this stranger is embodied by Christopher Mahone, or Christy, as he will be called throughout the rest of the play.
Great name for a character. You don't hear enough Christies out there. Christy's is a good. I want to write a play with a Christy. That's a good one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he sort of stumbles in, having been found on the side of the road by Sean, who is currently betrothed to Pegeen. And Sean kind of leaves him on the side of the road, doesn't go out and help him, but he eventually stumbles in kind of this disheveled state. And he eventually tells this tale that he's been on the run for like 10 days or something like that, because he 10 days ago clobbered his father in the head with like a shovel and split his head in twain, essentially, is the story that he tells. At one point, he goes so verbose as to say that he split him all the way down to his belt line.
This story changes with the number of different times that he tells it. You may start to get a sense of what the story of this play is.
Yep. He comes at a fortuitous time for Michael, again, the owner of the pub, because Michael is going off to a wake, and Pegeen has been complaining about the fact that she's left here all alone with all of these bandits out in the world. And so Michael, in a bit of fortuitous and maybe optimistic choices, says, well, hey, this violent individual is here, and he'd be perfect to sort of guard the place while I'm out and about.
That's a strong characterization. He does say, hey, listen, if this guy is willing to kill his abusive father, he must have quite a bit of courage. And so he's exactly the type of guy we need around here. So, you know, hey, listen, if you weren't sure why they were rioting, maybe you get a sense of it now. That's right. That's the story.
Now, this is much to the chagrin of Sean, who is there, and again is like just like days away from getting married to Pegeen. But Pegeen's into it. She's like, he's kind of interesting, and they have this conversation back and forth. They get to know each other, and eventually, this kind of goes over that way. Now, Sean kind of takes it into his hands to try to figure out some way to get rid of this guy, and so his first choice is to go to Father Riley, who's down the road a little way. But in that conversation, he also goes and talks to the widow Quinn. Now, the widow Quinn is sort of a well-known person in the town. Some various degrees of death have happened to her as well. She's accused of killing her husband. She's outsurvived both of her children. And so she's sort of this like force in the town who shows up as sort of a regulative measure that night and says that, no, I'm going to take Christy away from here, and he's going to come stay with me. You can't be here. You're a young woman, etc. But what becomes clearer and clearer is that she sort of has an angle as well of starting to have some level of attraction towards Christy. That comes out the next day a little bit more. Long story short, on that first night, though, Christy stays the night over in a separate room. There's much to do about where he's sleeping and all that sort of a thing. And he manages to become sort of the extra hand in the pub on that first night. Now, the next day happens and the word has spread. Sean has gone about the process of trying to get everyone in town on his side, but it super backfires on him. Everyone in town is just enamored of this Christie fellow who is here because he killed his father and he's on the run from the law.
The next group of people that come, just to steal from you for a second, because I think it's so funny, is this group of young women who all bring him presents because they want to meet the guy who killed his father.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's just the process of this whole day, right? More and more people come over. Eventually he's like conscripted into this like event that happens, like a donkey race, that the Widow Quinn signs him up for. But all the while, Sean is trying over and over to get rid of him. He offers him his coat, he offers him his hat, he has a ticket to another part of Ireland for him, and he tries to get rid of him over and over. To no avail, because Christy is starting to be enamored with Pegeen, and it's reciprocated. Pegeen is also sort of enamored with him, and they're starting to like have this like beginning of a flirtatious courtship happening. And that's much to Sean's chagrin, to the point that like that he's very distraught in one scene with the Widow Quinn, and the Widow Quinn seizes an opportunity of her own attraction and says, "Well, how about I seduce him and kind of marry him, and then he'll be out of your way, and you don't have to worry about it." And there's a whole bunch of deals about how many cows is going to be given for that, etc. It's very funny. But that sort of sparks the triangle.
It is very
yeah. That sparks the triangle of the second act, which is the Widow Quinn and Pegeen with Christy. Now, Christy, for his part, he kind of is all doe-eyed for Pegeen and will not be deterred from the fact. And so he kind of locks in on that. But there's kind of this a little bit of a push and pull for a little while as the Widow Quinn tries to pull him away, to no avail. However, the other stranger comes to town eventually, which starts briefly, to throw off.
The way the thing Widow Quinn wraps up with Christy, though, because she's trying to seduce him to get all the stuff she bargained for Sean. So then eventually she turns around to Christy and says, "Well, how about this? How about I help you seduce Peggy?"
Yeah,
but she makes the exact same deal with him, like line for line. Down
Super hedges the bet.
Negotiated with Sean.
Absolutely,
one way or the other.
So if one stranger to town isn't enough, a second one does as well, and it turns out that this stranger is Old Mahone. Yes, same name as Christy Mahone, because it turns out Christy just sort of bopped him on the noggin with a shovel. And here he is, having tracked his son over 10 days, trying to find him. There's some great farcical comedy about keeping them out of the same room together for a little while, as Widow Quinn especially like tries to keep it on lock that the father is here, so that the rest of the town doesn't immediately like kill Christy for trying to kill his father or something along those lines. But eventually it sort of is taken out of the pub. We have this sort of like festival that's happening downtown that Christy wins a bunch of awards at, and he's sort of brought back in triumph to the pub. And this a war of affection between he and Sean and Pegeen sort of comes to a head, with Pegeen and him kind of saying that they're going to get married, going to her father, getting permission, etc. All of it seems to be going their way, and then Old Mahone comes crashing through the door. And the secret's out. This sort of like myth that Christy has built for himself over the last day comes crashing down, that he's killed his father. And the father is there, and he's beaten up on him. They're beating up on each other, and eventually it comes to a head that Christy grabs a shovel and takes a swing at Old Mahone again. This happens outside of the pub. They kind of bring him outside. There's this fight. They come back in, and the whole town has now witnessed Christy kill his father.
And I gotta tell you, I feel, as a reader, and I assume as an audience member, I feel like an idiot when this happened. Because Christy takes the shovel, and his father and him are fighting. They go off stage, and he comes back on like, "Oh my gosh!" And the crowd's like, "Oh my gosh, you killed him! What are we gonna do? I killed him!" And I don't know, man. I should have known. I should have known. I fell for it. I fell for it just like the villagers did, because what happens?
So they begin to sort of realize that if they don't turn him in, if they don't bring him in for some form of execution, they talk about hanging him. They talk about like him fighting his way there too. That's a messier way to die.
They're all scared of him.
Yeah,
I think he's like this. He's like supposed to be this like scrappy teenage kid,
like a young kid. Yeah. And so they're all very worried about it. Eventually, they like are pulling him out, dragging him out. They use like peat fire to get his legs off of a chair or a table. Trying to like pull him out. Everyone's against him, right? At this point, Pegeen's against him. Everyone's against him.
They think he really did kill his father this time. Drag him off stage and hit him with a shovel. He's dead now.
And right at the moment that they sort of have him about to be dragged out, in crawls Old Mahone.
The first time I was reading this play, when that happened, I just like literally hit my head on the desk. I was like, how did I not? I fell for it. I did the same thing that the whole play. I was like, well, these villagers are just, I mean, come on, what idiots. They're followed for the fact that this kid, and then I fell for it. He didn't kill his father.
Yep. Truly wild. And so in the end, of course, there is no one dead, and thus there's no need to kill anyone. The father and son end up heading out with a little bit of kind of a judgy paragraph from Old Mahone about the kind of craziness of the people in this particular town.
I know. And it's like, you and your son just went to fisticuffs. He's hit you with a shovel twice in the past 2 weeks. I don't know what you're judging them for, dude.
Yeah. And there's sort of like, for a moment, it's sort of like you start to feel like, oh, everything will be back to normal. In fact, Sean thinks so and goes up to Pegeen and is like, well, now at least we can get married again together. But Pegeen like immediately spurns him, slaps him, and sort of says the line that is the title of the show.
I've lost the only Playboy of the Western world.
Yes, and that's the kind of that's the scope of the show right there.
Yeah, it's a kind of confusing story in its structure and arrangement. It's a little hard to read, again, because of the way the dialect appears on the page, but it is genuinely very funny. And also, so there's all these riots when it's originally done, right? Because the audience is objecting to the fact that essentially the story is that Christie is gaining popularity and notoriety. The village is enraptured with him. The girls are falling for him because he killed his father. And that's what the audience is objecting to. And it does feel a little bit like, hey, folks, let's just get to the end, because like, I think the fact that it's a little ridiculous that they love him for killing his father is like kind of part of it.
Yeah.
Like that, it's not that the playwright is like, it's cool to kill your father. I think like part of the story is about like, part of the play's question, I guess, is about like, you know, what makes you pop, you know, like what is it that this village fell in love with him for killing his father? And then when they think he actually killed his father right there in front of him, now all of a sudden they want to string him up.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. This play sort of has this, it's odd again within the context of realism and naturalism, but this play has almost a mythic structure to it of like, you know, this stranger comes to town with this tall tale that he's telling. He's on the side of the road.
Music Man.
Yeah, for sure. And like kind of a trickster tale too, right? Like this guy comes to town and spins a tale about himself and then sort of gets his comeuppance, but also kind of like, you know, avoids getting killed. So it's like this like sort of like, like a folk tale almost of like, and you kind of learn some lessons along the way about truth, but also maybe about love and like all these like little things, all while kind of having the welcome to laugh about it for a long time.
Yeah, and so if you're wondering, like, why would Christie tell anybody that he murdered his father? That actually is kind of a central story point of the show. Christie shows up in the dead of night in Act 1, very mysteriously out of the dark. Everybody's been talking about how there's somebody in the ditch, and it ends up being Christie. He's all dirty from his days of travel, and he immediately is like, are the police going to come here? And you know, the shop bar owner, Michael James, says, no, the police don't come here. And he says, oh, thank goodness. And what follows is 10 pages, maybe, of this like sort of guessing game they play with him. Like, well, why are you scared of the police? Let's come up with all these crimes. And they keep proposing crimes that he might have done. And he keeps being sort of aghast that they would ever think that of him. But what happens is that this kid who's come out of the dark and been by himself is slowly sort of warmed up to the idea that like he is getting all of this attention because of this story that he has. And eventually it's Peggy and her cleverness and her immense practicality who's the one that says like she sort of waves the guys off. This is in the stage directions too. It's not me reading into it. She sort of like waves at them to be quiet, and she says something to the effect of, please, I don't even think you've done anything at all. You're boring. And that's what causes him to go, whoa, wait a minute now. So it is something about the attention that he gets from the village that makes the lie more elaborate. This is, I think, the very last line of Act 1. This is after the Widow Quinns come and tried to take him off, and Peggy's forced him to stay there. So he's got these two, the Widow Quinn and Peggy, and he's got all these villagers who are asking about him. He says, well, it's a clean bed and soft with it, and it's great luck and company I've won me in the end of time. 2 fine women fighting for the likes of me, till I'm thinking this night, wasn't I a foolish fellow not to kill my father in the years gone by?
Yep. Yeah, and it's sort of like that sort of reversal of expectation is kind of like the guiding principle of the show. Over and over, like Sean shows up and like does the thing that like we're like, oh, this is surely the thing that's going to work. Like, or we hear that like he's just telling people broadly about it, and we just keep expecting
the next
police
morning,
to show
when
up.
all those villagers come by with the gifts, he ends up telling his story again, and this is part of how Synge has organized the plot. In the previous evening, when he's alone with Peggy, he tells this sort of one version of the murder that's is not quite as grandiose, let's say. The next morning, when he's got this group of young women with presents for him and the Widow Quinn there, he tells a very different version of the story, which is like a combat story. He was brandishing his this, and I had my shovel. We went back and forth, and the stage directions are that he's brandishing his mug of alcohol while he does this. So he's very much turned it into kind of like a barroom swashbuckling sword fight kind of version of the story. And we, the audience, are seeing that change of the story. So this is just dramatic irony played out, right? We saw the way he told the story the night before, and now we, the audience, are seeing how he's telling the story to this group of people, but none of them, except Christy, know that the story is changing. So we have knowledge of Christy's, if not his outright dishonesty, then his willingness to change the story for his own benefit all along. And so we see the way that this trick or this lie or whatever you want to call it is being employed in a way that the villagers don't.
And now, what do you think? Like, so oftentimes when I engage that sort of a plot structure, right, of like we know something and we're kind of getting in on it, we know the full context. I expect there to be like, you know, something awful happens to the character, or like something really like immoral is there to be learned. And I feel like the moral, I didn't find like a clear moral in that in the end. There isn't like someone who goes like, oh, lying's bad necessarily, though like consequences happen, I guess.
The only thing that like a character like says in that way, Peggy, and I'll see if I can find the line here, but I can't quite remember it. But Peggy says something to the effect of like, there's a difference between, this is after they've all learned that he's a liar. And they've learned that an old Mahone has shown up, right? And then Christy and his father get into a real fight, and he drags him out into the street, and he supposedly really does kill him with the shovel this time. And everybody thinks that. I'm not the only one who was tricked. Everybody was tricked. And so when them deciding, the villagers deciding, oh, now that we've seen him kill his father, now we have to punish him for this, whereas previously we're celebrating for it. And so all that to say, Peggy says something to the effect of like, there's a difference between hearing this swashbuckling tale and seeing it happen right in front of us. And there is something like, before old Mahone comes back alive the third time, and I feel like an idiot. Before that, I thought that I had kind of understood what was happening in the play, right? Everybody's celebrating him for killing his father, but then when he actually does do it, it no longer gets him the things that he wants. That is a classic writing reversal, right? Now he really does kill his father, but now it's not going to get him the girl. Now it's not going to get him all the rewards and the celebration and the presents. Now he's going to get strung up or turned over to the police, who are definitely going to hang him for it. And so at that point in the story, like, I thought I had grasped what the story was about. But as it goes on, then his father comes back and is not alive, and his father is alive, and his father's defending him to the villagers, and they head off back home, and Christy's essentially like, now I can win fights, and I'm the man of the house, so you have to do what I say. And that's like how it ends.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, no, it's a little disorienting at especially that like return of Old Mahone really like throws things off from what the
when he
expectation
comes back
is.
for the third time, man, it's just it just put me in a place. You know, I was just like, come on, how did I fall for that?
For sure. Yeah, because and then like the other characters as well. It's not like anyone else really here is like paragons of virtue. Like
Sure,
there's
right.
all sorts of people like going back on their word and stuff like that, or like trying to find their angle, right? Like the triangle of Widow Quinn and Christie and Pegeen is this really interesting triangle of negotiation, right? And a lot of that negotiation is knowledge and what the other one knows about the other and when they will tell or who they will tell and what the consequences of those secrets are.
Yes, I agree. I found the Peggy line, so let me read it real quick. So she says, again, this is after they've seen Christy murder his father and now they want to string him up. They say, Peggy says, I'll say, a strange man is a marvel. I don't really know what that means, so ignore that part. She says, with his mighty talk, but what's a squabble in your backyard and the blow of a shovel? It's a different word, but I'll say shovel. The blow of a shovel have taught me is that there's a great gap between a gallus story and a dirty deed.
Yeah.
Seeing it happen in front of me emphasizes the gap between the story you tell and the actual thing happening right in front of me. And that, again, at that point in the play, I thought I got it. I was like, okay, now I know what's happening here. But then it all falls apart for me.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. I just mean that like I was shocked.
Yeah.
In terms of like the secrets and the way it's all negotiated, it is a very it almost feels like a more contemporary comedy in the way that Synge has so carefully orchestrated who's on stage at what moments and when. The fact that we get to see Christy make this deal with the widow Quinn, about how she's going to help him win over Peggy. And then it does like, it makes you feel sort of, it's all a negotiation, like the whole of their love or their falling for each other or whatever is transactional is the word I was looking for. But then when he and Peggy come back from the party and he's won all these awards and they're finally alone together, they have like a fairly sensual conversation that like in a little bit like in the way that like Song of Solomon or something makes you blush for its like, it's like frankness in this kind of older
like
language
earnestness.
style. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's pretty explicit. I mean, they're pretty into each other at that moment. I'd say it's not like they, in a more contemporary show, they would probably like make out and maybe it would even heavily imply that they sleep together in that moment. This is from a moralistic society where there's a lot of eyes on them in a very small town. And so nothing like that happens, but they speak very explicitly about what it might be like when we're married, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and about things that we might do in bushes and fields.
Yep, for sure. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, no, like that writing feels very like modern. There's this great scene where old Mahone comes in after Christy sees him out the window and thinks he's a ghost. And Widow Quinn like holds this whole conversation with old Malone with like somehow is able to like check in and make eye contact with Christy. So like in my mind, he's like under a table or something like that. That isn't necessarily called for.
And during that conversation, she's asking him about what happened and he's describing Christy in a very different way than Christy's presented himself. He's like, he's lazy. He doesn't do a day of work in his life. Everybody in town hates him. And like, again, it's just such great dramatic irony as he's like, we see Christy hiding right there as the widow Quinn is talking to his father. It's great. It's like very, it's very Tartuffe. It's very like classically orchestrated. Someone's hiding.
And I think again, what's so interesting about the show is like the juxtaposition of it being for the reading of it being a realistic, naturalistic show with this much sort of hijinks in it. It has, and again, it's sort of like maybe earnest is like a really, really good word for it. This kind of genuine human hiding that happens isn't necessarily impossible. Sometimes it's implausible, right? Like old Mahone coming in for the third time after getting brained. That's like an implausible thing.
I mean, how does he not know how to hit somebody in the head with a shovel? I just like, how many times do you have to hit the same guy in the head with a shovel to kill him? I don't know.
Absolutely. And then also that it like dupes everyone, right? Like that everyone sees it happen. Absolutely. So yeah, there's like sort of like silly things.
One guy is like, I went over to him and felt his pulse and felt him die. Like one of the guys is like, I knelt by him and I felt him die in my hands.
Right.
And I was just like, okay, he's dead this time.
Now, it's been previously established. There's been lots of drinking happening.
Well, okay. Yes, that's true.
That is true. But yeah, so I think it is just a really cool play to hold those two things together of like, yes, we're going to like do realism, but do it in a zany way.
Yeah, it is. And there's such classic, like, writerly great things to happen. Like, so the reason Sean and Peggy aren't married is that they're waiting on this dispensation from the Catholic Church, essentially. I don't know the history of that or why they had to get that or whatever, but they're waiting on a form from the Catholic Church that says they can get married at the start of the show. And it's like supposed to come any day now. And of course, in the second act, that Peggy and Christy decide that they want to get married, and the next minute, her dad walks in and is like, "We got the form. You can marry Sean."
Yeah.
And it's like, that is like writerly intervention to the max. But it's great because it ups the drama right away. And this play uses dramatic irony, as we've been discussing, almost more than many other plays I can imagine, because even that is a great execution of the dramatic irony, because we, the audience, have watched Peggy and Christy be falling in love, have this whole explicit conversation about what happens when we get married, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They've decided they're going to get married. They're in love. They're all over each other. Her father comes in and says, "Now you can marry the other guy." And the comedy is built on the fact that we know something that the father doesn't. That she's not going to marry the other guy. That in fact, she's going to marry Christy. The comedy in that scene is also one of my favorite scenes in the play, I think, when they tell him that that Peggy wants to marry Christy instead of Sean. Sean and the father have this argument about who is going to fight him.
Yep.
And neither of them want to fight him because he's killed his father. So they're like both like too afraid to fight him. Sean is kind of presented as a coward, a physical coward throughout the play. That's part of the kind of character comedy that's being done on him. And Michael James specifically doesn't want to fight him because Christy like kills fathers. And at one point he's like, "Peggy, you're going to marry a guy who kills fathers and make me his father?" I mean, that's just great. That's awesome. That's so funny. And again, I think that the casting of Christy is supposed to be this like kind of scrawny dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like one casting of Christy was Cillian Murphy, so that kind of puts that in your head. You also get maybe a little bit of the menace, but also, like this kind of like younger like teenager threatening basically this whole village while also kind of magnetizing this whole village is like just sort of like another fun juxtaposition to hold.
Just some great insults in this play. Almost all of them directed at Sean. But two of the great ones. One time when Sean leaves very early in the play, Peggy turns to Christy and says, "That lad would wear the spirits from the saints of peace." I don't quite know exactly what it means, but I'm going to start saying it. That's hilarious. And then later, the widow Quinn is teasing Sean about being a coward. And she says to him, "It's true. All girls are fond of courage and do hate the like of you."
Brutal.
That's tough. That's a torch right there.
Absolutely. Pegging is like has lots of great like monologue scenes. Like the way that she runs this tavern is such like it's such a cool role.
And she's like well known for being kind of a verbal jouster. Like she's kind of fiery feels a little bit like patriarchal and sexist for the time, although she's described that way, like a fiery young woman. But I think that like her verbal prowess is part of her character. And it's just, that's such a great characteristic to give people in drama because so much of drama is talking. And when you give a character like verbal skill, that just makes him great. It's like Cyrano, right? Like why is Cyrano such a great character? Because he's so gifted with words. And Peggy is in that line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's sort of like one of the ways that like it becomes clear that there is an attraction between them because Christie, while pretty timid often, does have a way with words as he kind of expounds on this story more. And so yeah, there is this kind of like this like a shared soul sort of ability with words between the two of them.
Yeah. I think that is probably the time that we have for this awesome classic piece of Irish literature with, and I'll wrap up here, just a great title. I love a good title, man. Playboy of the Western World does it for me. That's an A++ from me. Thanks for listening to this episode. Please watch ahead because we got themed month coming up.
Yes, and in the meantime, if you want to keep chatting about this play and continue the conversation, you can do so on the social medias. We're at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about Playboy of the Western World with you or any of the other plays from this season thus far.
If you enjoyed our conversation, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes conversations about theater, acting, writing, themes, anything like that. Send them our way. That's what we do. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. A link to the new episode appears on our Facebook page every Monday when we published another episode about another great script, just like we will next Monday. Until then, I'm Jacob here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.